Hey, it's Tina Forsyth here. I want to share with you a somewhat backwards way, maybe a different way for you to explain to people what it is that you do. I saw a question recently in a group where someone was sharing their frustration that they were talking with a potential client and this person just didn't get what they were doing and they had a hard time explaining it and trying to, in this case, explain what an OBM does. Now, this can apply to you, of course, regardless of what kind of work you do. I have a slightly backwards way I like to approach this that can actually be very, very effective. And it's based on one really key thing to note. And that is that people will understand best through the lens of what's important to them. If what you do isn't relevant to them, if it's not something they need, it's not something that is, a pain point or a challenge or something going on for them in their own business, then sometimes they're just not going to get it, right? Because they have nothing to relate it to. So what you want to do when you're talking with people about what you do, in particular potential clients, when you're networking with colleagues, maybe referral sources, the best approach to take is to first find out what's going on for them and then to see where and how you can connect what you do to what's going on for them. So let's use the OBM example, right? Let's say you hop on the phone with a potential client, and quite often the first question out of their mouth is, if they're not, especially if they're not familiar with what an OBM does yet, they might say, so tell me what you do as an OBM. Now, our natural instinct, if you will, or our default mode is we start talking and we start explaining and maybe we even start babbling a little bit, right? But this is not the way I want you to start the conversation because we don't know what's going on for them yet. We have nothing to connect to them yet. So what you can say instead is, I'm happy to explain to you more about what an OBM does here a little bit later in our call, but let me ask you first. Tell me what's going on in the business. This is where you start asking your questions to determine what's going on with that person. This is where you start asking questions about what are their goals, what are their challenges, where do they feel like they need help, etc., etc., etc. And so as they share this information with you, then you can turn around and connect it to what you do. You can turn around and connect it to what you do. So you may say, oh my gosh, they're telling you like, I'm spending so much time managing my team and answering their questions. And my gosh, I'm so frustrated. I can't even get to the things that are important. It feels like everything's a mess. Some balls are being dropped and I don't even know if they're doing a good job. Let's say they go down that tangent. Part of your response is, you know what, as an OBM, I'm going to help you manage the team. I'm going to step in there. I'm going to become that person who they come to me. I'm going to work with the team to make sure that they're streamlined and they know what they're doing and they're getting the right things done in the right time, in the right way, etc., etc. So you can explain. The best way to explain what you do is to connect it to what's relevant for that person. So there's a couple of things to note here, right? If what you do is not relevant to that person, then they just may not get it. They just may not get it. So if you're an OBM talking with a potential client, or you're a coach talking with a potential client, or you build funnels, or you do social media, like whatever it is that you do, and you're talking with a potential client, if they don't need what it is you have to offer, let's say they don't need an OBM yet, what they need is a really good VA. That's fine. You can just say to them, hey, you know what? You don't need an OBM yet. What you need right now is a really good VA to help with some customer service, some tech, some basic admin, or what you need right now is a really good coach to help you figure out, where are you headed next and what's going to be the best way to get there, etc. Right? If they don't need what you have to offer, they may not get it. And last but least, it's okay if they don't get it. Sometimes we feel like we're a failure or we're just not doing it right or whatever if people just don't get what we do. And again, if it's not relevant to them, they may not get it. So you want to make sure that you're making that connection first of like, what's really going on with this person? Let me dig into that. Ah, great. Now I can connect to these things to explain how I can help them. But honestly, if they just don't get it, they just don't get it. Sometimes they're just not your people. They're not ready, whatever that may be. Don't feel like you, like sometimes we have this thing of like, I gotta make them understand. You don't have to make them understand. right? You may learn from the situation. You may realize, oh, next time I would approach it differently, or I would say this differently, or I would take the approach I just shared here. Instead of talking about what I do, I would ask questions so I can connect it to what they do. We may learn something from that. But just to really be purposeful here, the goal is to understand them first, and then you're going to be able to make that connection, and that will do the explaining for them. When you can connect what you do to what's really going on for them and what they need, that's where that connection, that understanding happens. All right, until next time, it's Tina Forsyth here. Bye now.